because the United States and Saudi Arabia have signed a $142 billion arms deal on the first day.
The United States and Saudi Arabia have signed what the White House is calling the largest arms sales agreement in history. The deal is valued at some $142 billion.
In 2017, something massive happened behind closed doors in the Golden Halls of Riyadh. A deal so large, so controversial, it was called the largest arms agreement in human history. $350 billion? That's $1 billion every 10 days for 10 years. But this wasn't just about selling fighter jets and missiles. It was about controlling oil, containing Iran, creating jobs, and triggering wars. Today, let's unpack the US-Saudi arms deal. Who benefited, who suffered, and why did the US shake hands with a nation at the heart of so much global controversy? Let's decode the strategy, the profits, and the cost of power. Chapter 1, How the Deal Was Born. It all began in May 2017. Donald Trump lands in Saudi Arabia on his first international trip as president. While the world expected diplomacy, Trump came with a clear agenda: deal-making. In 48 hours, Saudi Arabia and the US signed an arms package worth $110 billion upfront and $350 billion over 10 years. Let that number sink in. That's more than the entire GDP of South Africa, more than the US defense budget of 1996. The partners, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, and others. Trump proudly said it would create hundreds of thousands of American jobs. And for Saudi Arabia, it was a major leap toward military modernization. But what was Saudi Arabia buying? Chapter 2, what was in the $350 billion basket? This wasn't your average arms deal. It was a shopping spree of war tools. Here's what Saudi Arabia received: 150 Black Hawk helicopters, advanced F-15 fighter jets, THAAD missile defense system, worth $15 billion alone. Artillery, tanks, radar systems, and naval ships. Training modules, cybersecurity support, and spare parts. This was Saudi Arabia's attempt to become the most powerful military force in the Middle East, a clear message to Iran. And on Wall Street, Lockheed Martin stock rose by 1.6%, gaining $4.24 after the deal. Boeing shares jumped 1.6%, reflecting optimism in its defense business. Raytheon stock edged up nearly 1%, driven by demand for missile systems. The US wasn't just arming a partner, it was fueling one of the most profitable years in defense industry history. Chapter 3, The Real Agenda: Oil, Iran, and Influence. But behind the weapons was the strategy. Saudi Arabia isn't just a buyer, it's a kingmaker in oil geopolitics. It controls over 17% of global oil reserves, owns $100 billion plus in US securities. And it is a counterbalance to Iran, America's longtime adversary. By equipping Saudi Arabia, the US was securing a military partner in the Gulf, protection for global oil supply routes, and a frontline force against Iranian-backed militias in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. This wasn't just an arms trade, it was geopolitical chess, with each weapon a calculated move. Chapter 4, The Yemen Crisis and the Human Cost. Now comes the darker chapter: Yemen. Since 2015, Saudi Arabia has led a military intervention in Yemen's civil war. They claimed they were fighting Houthi rebels backed by Iran. But in reality, the war turned into a humanitarian nightmare. According to the UN, over 377,000 people have died. 60% of those deaths were from hunger, disease, and lack of health care. Saudi-led airstrikes using US-supplied bombs hit schools, hospitals, and weddings. In 2018, everything exploded again with the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Global outrage followed. Germany froze arms exports to Saudi Arabia. Even the US Congress tried to block future deals. But despite all this, the deal continued quietly. Chapter 5, Why the US Couldn't Walk Away. Here's the harsh truth: stopping the deal was never really an option, because Saudi Arabia wasn't just spending money, it was investing in US power. Over 500,000 American jobs were tied to defense manufacturing. 10% of Lockheed Martin's revenue came from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia pledged $40 billion to US infrastructure investments via its sovereign fund. And most importantly, the US didn't want Saudi Arabia turning to Russia or China for weapons. So even when Biden came into power promising no more blank checks, the policy softened quickly. Chapter 6, the future of the US-Saudi arms relationship. Today, Saudi Arabia is focusing on Vision 2030, a plan to reduce oil dependence and build local defense production. The goal? Localize 50% of its military spending by 2030. As of early 2024, the localization rate in Saudi military industries had risen to 19.35%, reflecting significant progress towards the 2030 target. Already, it's building factories in Riyadh in partnership with US firms. Meanwhile, the US continues to approve selective arms sales with more scrutiny and human rights clauses. But make no mistake, the $350 billion deal still echoes in every Gulf arms transfer today. So here's the final question. Was this deal a masterstroke of diplomacy and business, or a strategic mistake that fueled war and bloodshed? It gave the US billions in contracts and strategic power. It gave Saudi Arabia tools for war and repression. And it tied two nations in a partnership that's hard to walk away from. What do you think? Should business ever come before human rights? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns on global strategy, power plays, and billion-dollar deals, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and join the conversation where business meets geopolitics.